Hello, friends. Happy to be with you again. We're in the middle of this approach to the essential verities of the faith, the fundamental teachings that Shoghi Effendi has highlighted in his writings and in his texts, particularly here in this document that we've been looking at, the Dispensation of Baha'u'llah, written in 1934. The general subject of this Thursday class is reading the writings of Shoghi Effendi. Obviously, this is a huge challenge. We're just touching the very beginning of it with what we're doing now in these original documents. We'll move on to some other interesting themes as we progress. But I remember Shoghi Effendi's one letter. He says the Baha'is have two things to do: to study and to teach. And notice the order. I mean, this echoes the words of Baha'u'llah, that if you're going to rise to teach, teach yourself first and then teach others. So the question is that we never kind of complete the finishing teaching ourselves. That goes on and on and on. And the study of the faith is also ongoing. You never finish. I mean, Shoghi Effendi was talking about how you never can do the Igan. It's not something that you can do once and be satisfied. Obviously, because of the expanding consciousness which we partake of as being Baha'is, by nurturing our inner being with the recitation of the verses of God, with meditating about their meaning, this expands our consciousness and our understanding. So when we go back to read things we've studied previously, we see constantly new things in them. And how often the Master has invoked us to go back to the hidden words, to daily partake of the hidden words. So much of what we do is again related to Shoghi Effendi. The hidden words, we have his translation of the hidden words. That's what we're looking at. We're viewing it through this crystal view that he has of the writings, the overall take that he's able, as the guardian of the faith, whose shadow overshadows all mankind. He's endowed with respect to the meaning of the faith itself, which we didn't have before, especially in the West. I mean, and then without all of so many of the writings were not published and so on. One of the things that I hope grows, as we're progressing through looking at different writings of Shoghi Effendi, is this omniscience with respect to the meaning of the writings, with respect to the scope of the faith itself in the world, the mission of the faith in the world has been interpreted by Shoghi Effendi. It's not just that he's interpreted in his translations, he's also interpreted through the writings of the vision of the cause. It was very hard to get an understanding of the wholeness of the faith. Of course, none of us really can manage that, but that goes on for a long time. We, at the time of the passing of the Master, we had, of course, many explanations of Abdul Baha from his talks, which was a terrific elaboration for the Baha'is everywhere in the world, East and West, through Abdul Baha's interpretive powers, to understand what the intention of Baha'u'llah was, to understand the mind of Baha'u'llah, to be able to look at the words of Baha'u'llah and know what the intention of the manifestation was. These are unique services, really, that we've never had that in past dispensations. And it's a gift, I think, for which we have to be endlessly grateful. And our expression of gratitude comes by immersing ourselves in his understandings and in the teachings that Shoghi Effendi gives us through his writings. Already in this course, we've looked at the statement to the UN committee, which is an overview, a summary, a resume, if you will, of the goals and intentions and purpose of the faith in the world. That's a very important document. If you've come along lately to the course, you can look back in the materials that we have available online, the Thursday class materials, and find that document and read that. Then after that, the foreword to God Passes By is another very key document that gives us in a few pages an overview of the whole cause, where it came from, where it's going. So that's very important. Those two then become an introduction to God Passes By, which gives not only the teachings, but the history of the faith. And Shoghi Effendi said we should be studying the teachings and the history of the cause, both of these. And in that, he also was a major contributor by his having edited and translated the Dawnbreakers of Nabil. And we have that to turn to and inspire ourselves. We've gotten into some details now in the dispensation, the last part of the dispensation, which deals with the Baha'i administrative order, which we've looked at the whole administration from the point of view of statements of Shoghi Effendi in God Passes By, and then again now in the dispensation, we're taking that up, and we've gotten to a stage now where he's going to talk a little bit about the theory on which the administrative order is based and the principles that govern the operation of its institutions. So we have that to turn to now. And this is a material that needs to be chewed, I think. It's not immediately obvious, all the aspects of it. One needs to take a look at it now, and you may have some other comments to make later on or questions. That'll be fine. Now I have to find out how to get this document on the screen. Let's see, share screen. Okay. You should have that in front of you now, the Baha'i administrative order and the dispensation of Baha'u'llah. This is part 4. It's been broken. I've broken it into some sections. And I'm going to read for you here. You can follow along. A word should now be said regarding the theory on which this administrative order is based, and the principle that must govern the operation of its chief institutions. It would be utterly misleading to attempt a comparison between this divinely conceived order and any of the diverse systems which the minds of men at various periods of their history have contrived for the government of human institutions. Such an attempt would in itself betray a lack of complete appreciation of the excellence of the handiwork of its great author. How could it be otherwise when we remember that this order constitutes the very pattern of that divine civilization which the almighty law of Baha'u'llah is designed to establish upon the earth? The diverse and ever-shifting systems of human polity, whether past or present, whether originating in the East or in the West, offer no adequate criterion wherewith to estimate the potency of its hidden virtues or to appraise the solidity of its foundations. The believers at different times suggested to the Guardian, well, this is a form of modified socialism, or this is this, or it's not. We're democratic, right? And he would answer to the pilgrims in clarification, and that's what's reflected in these marvelous paragraphs of the dispensation. The Baha'i Commonwealth of the future, of which this vast administrative order is the sole framework, is both in theory and practice not only unique in the entire history of political institutions, but can find no parallel in the annals of any of the world's recognized religious systems. Now, some of the points he starts, I bulleted these points. He says, no form of democratic government, no system of autocracy or dictatorship, whether monarchical or republican, no intermediary scheme of a purely aristocratic order, nor even any of the recognized types of theocracy, whether it be the Hebrew Commonwealth or the various Christian ecclesiastical organizations, or the imamate, or the caliphate in Islam. Now, if you're not familiar with these terms, you want to find out the meaning of imamate and caliphate in Shia and Sunni Islam. None of these, he states, can be identified or be said to conform with the administrative order which the master hand of its perfect architect. This newborn administrative order incorporates within its structure certain elements which are to be found in each of the three recognized forms of secular government, without being in any sense a mere replica of any one of them, and without introducing within its machinery any of the objectionable features which they inherently possess. Now, this recognized forms of secular government refers to originally to the explanations of Aristotle, in which he sets forth these forms, and then he also makes mention of their inherent faults and shortfallings. This administrative order, it blends and harmonizes as no government fashioned by mortal hands has as yet accomplished the salutary truths which each of these systems undoubtedly contains, without vitiating the integrity of those God-given verities on which it is ultimately founded. He says the administrative order is divinely conceived, divinely revealed. And that's what we want to remember. So it has the verities on which it's ultimately founded are very important. And to some degree, it reflects systems of the past, but it takes its truths, which have proven themselves in the past, without vitiating, here he says, the integrity of the God-given verities on which it's ultimately founded. Again, the administrative order of the faith of Baha'u'llah must in no wise be regarded as purely democratic in character, inasmuch as the basic assumption which requires all democracies to defend fundamentally upon getting their mandate from the people is altogether lacking in this dispensation. The institutions of the cause, the Guardian, and now the Universal House of Justice are not subject to being dictated to by the mass of the believers. This is quite an interesting and divinely conceived aspect to the cause. In the conduct of the administrative affairs of the faith, in the enactment of the legislation necessary to supplement the laws of the Kitabi Akdas, the members of the Universal House of Justice, it should be borne in mind, are not, as Baha'u'llah's utterances clearly imply, responsible to those whom they represent, nor are they allowed to be governed by the feelings, the general opinion, and even the convictions of the mass of the faithful, or of those who directly elect them. They are to follow in a prayerful attitude the dictates and promptings of their conscience. They may, indeed, they must acquaint themselves with the conditions prevailing among the community, must weigh dispassionately in their minds the merits of any case presented for their consideration, but must reserve for themselves the right of an unfettered decision. God will inspire them with whatsoever he willeth is Baha'u'llah's incontrovertible assurance. They, and not the body of those who either directly or indirectly elect them, have been made the recipients of the divine guidance, which is at once the lifeblood and ultimate safeguard of this revelation. What does he mean by directly or indirectly elect them? I should think this refers to the fact that we elect national assemblies. That would be the indirect part of our electing the House of Justice, and then the members of the national assemblies elect the body of the Universal House of Justice, a direct election. Moreover, he who symbolizes the hereditary principle in this dispensation, here now referring to the guardian, obviously, has been made the interpreter of the words of its author and ceases consequently, by virtue of the actual authority vested in him, to be the figurehead in various monarchies. For instance, you hear about the Queen, the British Queen, that she reigns, but she doesn't rule. The constitutional setup, the parliament and so on, rule the country, but she is in a way, then a figurehead, stands with the principle of royalty, stands with the idea that monarchy has been ordained by God in past dispensations. Now here we have the guardian with something more to do. He's become the head of the faith, and in that sense reflects monarchy. And in addition, he's been given this power of interpretation of the writings and to guide the believers then in association with the coming House of Justice. He established so many guidelines for us and laid the path for us ahead. Nor can the Baha'i administrative order be dismissed as a hard and rigid system of unmitigated autocracy, or as an idle imitation of any form of absolutistic ecclesiastical government, whether it be the papacy, the imamate, or any other similar institution, for the obvious reason that upon the international elected representatives of the followers of Baha'u'llah has been conferred the exclusive right of legislating on matters not expressly revealed in the Baha'i writings. A step and an aspect of the Baha'i administration is very important to keep the faith all courant with the needs of the world, with the changing conditions of mankind. Then, with respect to that, the guardian says, neither the guardian of the faith nor any institution apart from the International House of Justice can ever usurp this vital and essential power or encroach upon that sacred right. Bullet pointed some other aspects here that are further evidences of the non-autocratic character. The abolition of professional priesthood, with its accompanying sacraments of baptism, of communion, and of confession of sins. Since all these are not, these sacraments are not included in the writings of the faith, there's no need for a professional priesthood. The laws requiring the election by universal suffrage of all local, national, and international houses of justice. Again, not autocratic. The total absence of episcopal authority with its attendant privileges, corruptions, and bureaucratic tendencies. This is the priesthood in general. Apart from the accompanying, apart from their role in this, in purveying the sacraments, they also rule in the community. These Shoghi Effendis are further evidences of the non-autocratic character of the Baha'i administrative order and of its inclination to democratic methods in the administration of its affairs. Nor is this order, identified with the name of Baha'u'llah, to be confused with any system of purely aristocratic government, in view of the fact that it upholds on the one hand the hereditary principle and entrusts the guardian of the faith with the obligation of interpreting its teachings, and provides on the other for the free and direct election from among the mass of the faithful of the body of that constitutes its highest legislative organ. So, friends, you realize you're participating in the election of the House of Justice itself when you cast your ballot for delegates in the national scheme of Baha'i administration. We vote for, we have delegate elections. We elect delegates from each area in each country, however that is arranged according to the country. And then those delegates gather in convention and elect in another level of election the body of the National Spiritual Assembly. And those members, when it comes time for the election, the re-election of the House of Justice, constitute the body that elects the Universal House of Justice. So you're taking part in it with your local voting, with your participation in delegate elections. Whereas this administrative order cannot be said to have been modeled after any of these recognized systems of government, it nevertheless embodies, reconciles, and assimilates within its framework such wholesome elements as are to be found in each one of them. Embodies, reconciles, and assimilates within its framework. Then the guardian points out some of these. He says the hereditary authority which the guardian is called upon to exercise, Shoghi Effendi being the grandson of Abdul Baha, the eldest grandson, the vital and essential functions which the House of Justice discharges, the specific provisions requiring its democratic election by the representatives of the faithful. Representative faithful in this sense, being members of the National Assemblies that have been elected by the whole body of the Baha'is of voting age that are participating in the election of delegates. These combine to demonstrate the truth that this divinely revealed order can never be identified with any of the standard types of government referred to by Aristotle in his works, embodies and blends with the spiritual verities on which it is based, the beneficent elements which are to be found in each one of them. We're going to look at, place this in the form of a chart, which we're going to look at shortly. But before that, goals inherent in each of these systems, being rigidly and permanently excluded. This unique order, however long it may endure and however extensive its ramifications, cannot ever degenerate into any form of despotism, of oligarchy or demagogy, which must sooner or later corrupt the machinery of all man-made and essentially defective political institutions. Now, let's see if I can bring up this other. Here we have a chart. The three recognized forms of secular governance from Aristotle's writings. And we have two columns here. One at the forms, those forms, which are three that he outlines, and then the degenerations that come, what happens, the abusive possibility of the outcome. Not that it's always there, but it has the potential of coming in all of the autocracy or monarchy, ruled by one, absolute government with controlling influence. This has led at times to despotism or tyranny, oppressive or cruel rule. Then aristocracy, which is the government by a few, privileged class, ruled by the best, government by the best citizens, or the best representatives of intellect or learning, whatever it happens to be. And this can degenerate into an oligarchy, supremacy of privileged order, despotic power also exercised by them. Democracy itself, we have the rule or might by the people, the leadership of the populace, rule by the people, government by the people. This, the negative part of that, demagogy or false claims and promises that are made to the people to gain power, the appeal to the desires or prejudices of the mass of people, the manipulation of in other words, of the vote and the electing process by false information, by false promises, and so on. This is a weakness of democracy. Abdullah said that democracy without education is a form of tyranny. So people have to be alert and understanding in order for democracy to work. And also in the faith, we need to, with our vote, we have to vote intelligently. We have to understand who we're voting for, and all of that ties together. So now you see how that chart refers us to these admitted evils inherent in each of these systems. Shoghi Effendi then goes on to talk about the origins. Dearly beloved friends, significant as are the origins of this mighty administrative structure, and however unique its features, the happenings that may be said to have heralded its birth and signalized the initial stage of its evolution seem no less remarkable. How striking, how edifying the contrast between the process of slow and steady consolidation that characterizes the growth of its infant strength and the devastating onrush of the forces of disintegration that are assailing the outworn institutions, both religious and secular, of present-day society. This is very interesting for us to reflect on in terms of what's going on now in the world with so much disintegration, the forces of disintegration acting on our old institutions, how they're changing in character, how they've lost authority and power, how they're not looked up to as they were in the past, both religious and secular. And then with respect to this, Shoghi Effendi points out several other points right in the continuing text. The vitality which the organic institutions of this ever-expanding order so strongly exhibit, the obstacles which the high courage, the undaunted resolution of its administrators have already surmounted. And now, friends, you can read a lot about the history of this and the early development of these institutions in the last section, the section about the administrative order in God Passes By, where Shoghi Effendi has listed and gathered so many different details about what's gone on in the administration up to the time when he wrote the book in 1944. The obstacles, yes, are surmounted. The fire of an unquenchable enthusiasm that glows with undiminished fervor in the hearts of its itinerant teachers. The heights of self-sacrifice which its champion builders are now attaining. The breadth of vision, the confident hope, the creative joy, the inward peace, the uncompromising integrity, the exemplary discipline, the unyielding unity and solidarity which its stalwart defenders manifest. And then the degree to which its moving spirit has shown itself capable of assimilating the diversified elements within its pale, of cleansing them of all forms of prejudice, and of fusing them with its own structure. Obviously, friends, this is an ongoing process with the new believers coming to the faith and so on. All of this has to take place, but it takes place through the two duties and requirements Shoghi Effendi has set forth, what we spoke about at the beginning. The study, on the one hand, the study of the writings, so that you expose yourself to the spirit that's been infused into those writings, and they act on your character and gradually change you, perhaps by, at first, in a sense, shaming you that you don't live up to the teachings in the right way, and that leading to increased spirituality and depending on the confirmations of God to give you strength to be able to go on and do what you're supposed to do, because he doesn't say give it up. Even if you're weak, you don't give it up. You keep going back to the study of the writings. You keep going back to teaching the faith. These, he said, are evidences of a power which a disillusioned and sadly shaken society can ill afford to ignore. It's taking time for them to recognize. Then he suggests that we compare these splendid manifestations of the Spirit animating this vibrant body of the faith of Baha'u'llah with the cries and agony, the follies and vanities, the bitterness and prejudices, the wickedness and divisions of an ailing and chaotic world. Witness the fear that torments its leaders and paralyzes the action of its blind and bewildered statesmen. How fierce the hatreds, how false the ambitions, how petty the pursuits, how deep-rooted the suspicions of its peoples. How disquieting the lawlessness, the corruption and unbelief that are eating into the vitals of a tottering civilization. Because this is the way we have to read the affairs of the world at present. That's what's going on. Far from it getting better, obviously it's getting worse. And the reason for that is to gradually draw attention to the faith and its solutions to the revelation which has given this new order to the world and is suggesting its adoption. Might not this process of steady deterioration, which is insidiously invading so many departments of human activity and thought, be regarded as a necessary accompaniment to the rise of this almighty arm of Baha'u'llah? Shoghi Effendi is suggesting to us here that this deterioration has to take place so that the rise of this mighty arm of Baha'u'llah, and here he's comparing the administrative order to the arm of Baha'u'llah, and as I recall, there are Old Testament verses that say that in the time of the future that the arm of God will rule for him in the world. And this is a reference here back to that, to the biblical origin of that, as far as I understand. Now, Shoghi Effendi goes in more into what's going on, the disintegration part. We know there's disintegration in the cause he's spoken about, and integration. Disintegration in the outside world of everything that has accumulated over the centuries, and integration of the beginning movements of this administrative order, and which Shoghi Effendi characterizes here in this next paragraph as the birth pangs of the world order. The agitation that takes place sometimes in the growth of the cause, the challenges that attack it, are birth pangs of the coming world order, that arc of human salvation. Might we not, back to the beginning of the paragraph, might we not look upon the momentous happenings which in the course of the past 20 years have so deeply agitated every continent of the earth as ominous signs simultaneously proclaiming the agonies of a disintegrating civilization and the birth pangs of that world order? Now he's talking about past 20 years. This is 34 back to 24 back to 1914, the year when the First World War broke out. During this whole period, he says, ominous signs proclaiming simultaneously proclaiming the agony and the birth pangs of the world order, that arc of human salvation that must needs arise upon its ruins. I think one of the reasons we stay away from national politics, trying to fix the world from that point of view, is because they're destined to all go to ruin. You want to fix the building that's going to burn down, and it's on those ashes that this new gift of God is going to arise in the future. This is quite an extraordinary way to think about things. Now look at this signs that he mentions here in this paragraph, are then he lays out some of them. Let's read these now. The catastrophic fall of mighty monarchies and empires in the European continent, allusions to some of which may be found in the prophecies of Baha'u'llah. The decline that has set in and is still continuing in the fortunes of the Shia hierarchy in his own native land. That's the branch in Iran. The fall of the Qajar dynasty, the traditional enemy of his faith, the overthrow of the Sultanate and the Caliphate, the sustaining pillars of Sunni Islam, to which the destruction of Jerusalem in the latter part of the first century of the Christian era offers a striking parallel. The wave of secularization which is invading the Mohammedan ecclesiastical institutions in Egypt and sapping the loyalties of its staunchest supporters. As the religions in the world gradually become more and more secular in their outlook, the quality of the faith of its followers and supporters has been diminishing. The humiliating blows which have afflicted some of the most powerful churches of Christendom in Russia, in Western Europe, and in Central America, I think specifically the nationalization of Catholicism in Mexico is one of the key points of that period. But you can see some of these references in other Shoghi Effendi's writings. The dissemination of progressive doctrines that are undermining the foundations and overthrowing the structure of seemingly impregnable strongholds in the political and social spheres of human activity. And lastly, the signs of an impending catastrophe, strangely reminiscent of the fall of the Roman Empire in the West, which threatens to engulf the whole structure of present-day civilization. Friends, though we're not about politics, certainly we want to keep ourselves informed if we're to understand all these processes that are going on in the disintegration of the world, to read reliable sources of news, to read important books that have to do with the subject, so that we can relate the birth and development of this administrative order in our conversations, so that we don't look like total dummies about what's going on in the world. All these various points, he says, they all witness to the tumult which the birth of this mighty organ of the religion of Baha'u'llah has cast into the world. A tumult which will grow in scope. Implications of this constantly evolving scheme are more fully understood, and its ramifications more widely extended over the surface of the globe. This is also, we discussed this a bit looking in the forward of God Passes By. Shoghi Effendi is clearly saying that this tumult arises because of the birth of this mighty organ of the religion of Baha'u'llah. A tumult which will grow in scope and in intensity as the administrative order extends itself and consolidates itself across the face of the globe. So much with some of the Baha'is say, oh, I don't know, the faith has promised to bring peace and so on, but I don't see anything like that coming. No, you can't see it easily now. It's a very dark period, but this is a dark period because the old order is being rolled up so that a new one can be rolled out in its stead. A word more in conclusion. The rise and establishment of this administrative order, the shell that shields and enshrines so precious a gem, the world order, constitutes the hallmark of this second and formative age of the Baha'i era. The rise and establishment of the administrative order is the hallmark of this formative age we're presently in. It will come to be regarded as it recedes farther and farther from our eyes as the chief agency empowered to usher in the concluding phase, the consummation of this glorious dispensation. Let no one, while this system is still in its infancy, misconceive its character, belittle its significance, or misrepresent its purpose. The bedrock on which this administrative order is founded is God's immutable purpose for mankind in this day. The source from which it derives its inspiration is no one less than Baha'u'llah himself. Its shield and defender are the embattled hosts of the Abha kingdom. Its seed is the blood of no less than 20,000 martyrs who have offered up their lives that it may be born and flourish. The axis round which its institutions revolve are the authentic provisions of the will and testament of Abdu'l-Baha. Its guiding principles are the truths of our faith has so clearly enunciated in his public addresses throughout the West. The laws that govern its operation and limit its functions are those which have been expressly ordained in the Kitab-i-Aqdas. The seat round which its spiritual, its humanitarian, and administrative activities will cluster are the Mashriq al-Askar and its dependencies. The pillars that sustain its authority and buttress its structure are the twin institutions of the guardianship and of the Universal House of Justice. The underlying aim which animates it is the establishment of the New World Order as adumbrated by Baha'u'llah. The methods it employs, the standards it inculcates, incline it to neither East nor West, neither Jew nor Gentile, neither rich nor poor, neither white nor colored. Its watchword is the unification of the human race. Its consummation, the advent of that golden millennium, the day when the kingdoms of this world shall have become the kingdom of God himself, the kingdom of Baha'u'llah. Shoghi Effendi, February 84. All right, friends, let's see. Back with you again. We could take a look at the questions in the chat box, Swan. And again, if there are questions here, we have some socializing going on. The question is, he will reveal unto them what he willeth. Can you share how you experienced this? I'm referring to the fact that I served as a member of the body for 22 years. This is quite interesting. You know, there was no light flashing in the middle of the table like said, that's it. Or it all came from a process of consultation. This is my own personal observations. Members would propose something, and that seemed to, because we would all bring agenda items, the agenda was shared out amongst the 9 members according to the things that they were following closest and that they would bring to the attention of the House. Then the House had access to all the incoming correspondence and communications from the teaching center, obviously, all the members. But then some things wouldn't be resolved. There would be questions that hadn't been answered before. They would have to come fresh to the House, and then the House would address them, that in consultation. And the members had different points of view. Sometimes something that was said, another person would then confirm that, would reinforce that, or elaborate it slightly more. And gradually you saw consensus building up in the body as it was talked about, and modifications were introduced, and recollections that this has been treated in this way and that way, and what the teachings say, and do we have other precedents about it? Some of those may have been brought by the member presenting the matter to the House of Justice as background and review that the members would have read before they came to the meeting to consider everything to do, for instance, with the parental consent for marriage for wives. So gradually, a view would start to prevail in the consultation, and then oftentimes the chairman and the chairmanship of the House of Justice rotated alphabetically amongst all the members, week by week. The chairman may say, "I think we have a conclusion here," and he'd state it, and then maybe someone would have one modification suggested, and that if that was looked at, then that became the decision. In 22 years I was on the House of Justice, I only saw the House of Justice actually vote on 2 matters that were difficult, and we weren't sure just exactly where they wanted to vote on it. Otherwise, the consultation would move to unanimity. That was the nature of it. When you found that you'd had a solution, was everyone happy with, and you understood, even if you had some different ideas, you understood that the majority is doing that, then that's the direction that would be confirmed. It was nice to not have to worry about it afterwards, that you knew that it had an element of guidance to it. Sometimes matters would come up in our meeting that were not on the agenda. Somehow an issue would arise. I remember one particular one dealing with the development of the faith in China, what was happening in China, or view of that, but there was a lot of interest in how to move that forward, and a very creative consultation that took an hour or more in the middle of our meeting that hadn't been planned. And that happened also with respect when the Berlin Wall came down and when the Soviet Union started breaking up. Such excitement about the possibility of sending in teachers and travelers to help spread the cause in that part of the world. Looking at your chat list here. It's certainly yet the responsibility of Baha'is to take part. It's a question about participation in Baha'i elections. It's quite low percentage-wise. Is this in other countries? How can this be rectified? And what are its harmful effects, if any? Well, this is a question of the responsibility that Baha'is take. If they're not properly deepened, if they take this as just another election and let the friends do it and I don't need to waste my time with it, that's a lack of understanding of everything we're reading here about the administrative order, because the vote of the individual believers is fundamental. in building towards the election of the House of Justice. So I think it's a question of seriousness of our involvement in the faith. Obviously, there's Baha'is at all different levels of understanding and willingness to sacrifice and so on. Not so much to criticize them as we need to encourage and have Baha'is speak out in the feast and raise the question of how can we get the Baha'is to take part. They're not only not taking part in the meetings, sometimes they're not in the election, but they're not participating in feasts or something. So people are at different stages of development, and oftentimes there's a lot of people shut in. I'm hearing around in conversations and so on that a number of individuals who hadn't been seen in a number of Baha'i communities because of Zoom have suddenly started participating. They weren't able to get out of their houses. Their circumstances were such that they weren't free to participate in Baha'i meetings. But then now they're coming to the feast. They're signing up with the Zoom and part of the feast. This is quite an interesting development. What might be the tabernacle of the most great peace referred to in promulgation? I wouldn't know how to interpret that, but my thoughts move towards the Commonwealth of the Baha'i International Commonwealth. That's the tabernacle of the most great peace. The extension of the spiritualization of the lesser peace in the form of the most great peace. What can you say about the statement Baha'is everywhere have been urged to give up their old affiliations and withdraw from membership in the Masonic and other secret societies in order to be entirely free to serve the faith of Baha'u'llah as a united body? What can I say about it? This is one of the requirements the Guardian set forth. He said, be patient with the friends, but move, move them towards this. There was also not only secret societies, but in the 30s, the 20s and the 30s, a number of the Baha'is were members of the churches, and gradually Shoghi Effendi was weaning from them and showing how it's misleading to participate in activities of the church when you're a Baha'i. I mean, it doesn't demonstrate the independent magnificence of the revelation of Baha'u'llah that you represent. And gradually, as we got more of the writings, as his own world order letters were understood by their friends, they divorced themselves from these other activities. And secret societies, one of the elements of membership in the Masonic order is that some aspects of its work are secret. In the Baha'i faith, the teachings are all open, so on. You mentioned that we should let the institutions of the old world order fall apart. At the same time, Shoghi Effendi and the Universal House of Justice are encouraging us to be in the forefront of any question and participate in the dialogues of society. What perspective should we have in this seeming dichotomy? Well, we're supposed to relate the teachings of the faith to the forward aspects of what's happening in the world, and along the yes, some of the institutions are deteriorating and going down the drain, so to speak. But on the other hand, there are movements in the world and interests that we can reinforce with our teachings and with our participation with them. And that's why we're supposed to be in a dialogue with the society. We're gradually developing our skills in that regard. So I don't think it's a dichotomy. It's not that we're letting them fall apart, it's that we're witnessing them falling apart and able to draw attention when we have hearing ears that this dual process of breakdown and building up is going on simultaneously in the world. This is about the mentioned last time the Guardian having said that the word religion it doesn't adequately describe the faith. It's rather something like New World Order. And when teaching, how can we convey the significance of the faith adequately? As in the Western world, religion usually has unpopular connotations. That's true, but we also have to defend religion and adequately define it. I think using the word, when we use the word religion, what are we referring to and what are we not referring to? It isn't that we can't use the word. It's obviously people. There's just as negative an influence right now. The, all of the Christians are pretty much convinced that world order is the world order of the devil. Since they believe that the world is going to be destroyed, that Christ comes, the world is destroyed. You have to introduce that in a gentle way too. If you're talking to people of Christian background. And it's always a challenge to us how to convey the significance of the faith adequately. Goodness. Talking about the House of Justice would get questions on subjects and would eventually publish compilations on those points from the vast wealth of writings that we have in the World Center on how important it was for the Friends to study them. And then it's mentioned here that these were compiled in 3 volumes by the Australian Publishing Trust. A lot of those are online also from the World Center. I think you have to check to see what I'm not up to date with the latest things, but I know the compilations, some of the compilations the House of Justice published are online. If you know about other places where they can be found, you should let the friends know. And then it's suggestion that if we're going to enter into dialogue with people, we should first learn in detail what the teachings say on a subject and actually what the position of the world from different points of view is. How can we have an intelligent dialogue if we're not prepared? Friends, we are a little over the hour. Um, Such a pleasure to be with you. I wish to see all of you and greet you and talk to you. You have to be patient with me sitting here looking at my own image on the screen and not terribly uplifting. All the best to you. Bye for now.